Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of the Weekend Toast. This is part of our recurring segment, Movies with Josh, where I introduce some movies with some deeper themes to the guys to watch as well as y'all. And this week we have watched No Country for Old Men. So joining me, as always, we have Devin Walters, Isaiah Babcock, and Ben Dishman. I'm Josh Offhill. How are y'all doing tonight?
I've been better. Ragweed's really high this week, so my face is just like, ugh. But I'm going to give it my best effort tonight, guys.
I'm doing well.
I'm fantastic. Sorry, Devin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm doing great. So
Yeah,
that's a
The
bummer
air
for
is trying to
you.
kill me.
Yeah, your face is so red right now. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the movie with a quick summary. So this is No Country for Old Men, written and directed by Joel and Ethan Coen. It's a adaptation of Cormac McCarthy's novel of the same name, a very faithful adaptation, I might add. But the movie starts off with a character, Llewellyn Moss, who's played by Josh Brolin. This is taking place in West Texas in the 1980s, and Llewellyn is out hunting in the wilderness and comes up on a shootout from a drug deal gone bad. There he discovers $2 million and eventually has to go on the run because he stole $2 million of drug money, like you do. And once he does that, we're shown a character that we've already been introduced to named Anton Chigurh, who's a very troubling, disturbing, almost exotic kind of outlook of a character played by Javier Bardem.
Haircut, exotic. That's exactly,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's a strange guy. He's a complete psychopath. He views himself almost as a actor of fate. Like everything he does is he's not just some killer for a cartel, but he's doing everything out of this principle. Very famous for probably second most famous to Two-Face for flipping a coin on whether he decides to shoot people or not. But he is going after Llewellyn Moss. And as we see Llewellyn act and try to survive, we see he's very capable. We learn that he's a veteran and that he's able to not only take care of himself on the run, but he has martial skills. So even when he comes and actually comes into a gunfight with Chigurh, he actually shoots him, which is very rare. He's able to survive. But the whole time, he's constantly being pursued. They even have some interactions where Chigurh is telling him he knows what's coming. He knows what's coming. The end of his story, however, is building up to a climax. After their first shootout, they have a phone conversation where Llewellyn basically promises Chigurh, "I'll meet you, and we're going to finish this thing." But when we get to the end of Llewellyn's story, he dies off camera, not at the hand of Chigurh, but of a different part of a Mexican drug gang that caught up with him first. And we see this from the perspective of another character, almost a second protagonist, Sheriff Ed Tom Bell, played by Tommy Lee Jones. So Sheriff Bell is a older sheriff of the county where Llewellyn lives. He is finding out about all of these events of Llewellyn and Anton Chigurh chasing after him, all the drug violence that kind of surrounds that. He's always behind the pace of when it's happening. So we see he's an incredibly skilled investigator, but no matter how much he figures out, he's always too slow. And it's from his perspective, like I said, that we come across Llewellyn Moss, who dies before he was ever able to get to him, ever able to help him. And the end of the movie kind of focuses on him with some details I don't want to get into exactly yet. I want to save that for our conversation. But throughout the events that go on with Llewellyn, Sheriff Bell feels like there's just no place for him anymore as sheriff, and he ends up quitting rather than going on as a sheriff in this new world of crime and violence that he sees. So with that, guys, let's go ahead and get into the story. I kind of want to start off with the story of Llewellyn versus Anton Chigurh. So when Llewellyn takes the money, I know two of you, have all of you seen this movie before? Or are we all rewatching? Okay, yeah. So we've all seen this before. But did you ever have a sense, even in your first watch, if you can remember back then, that there is a way for Llewellyn to get out of this scenario?
After he takes the money?
Yeah, like he could take the money, and as long as he gets away from Chigurh, he can have his own life. Did you guys ever get that sense?
No, but upon another viewing, I realized if he had not brought the guy water, they would never found him.
No,
He's
Yeah.
that's not.
Yeah.
He had the tracer still in the bag, and he.
Oh, he did have the tracer. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
supposed to
So
be
yeah.
missing.
Yeah, so there's a
So-
tracer in the bag that's part of the reason that Chigurh can kind of come after him.
Yeah, but
But maybe he would have transferred the money from the bag. But who knows?
doesn't he still? He has no trouble finding him even when the tracer's removed, right?
Yeah, because he already knows. He already knows who he is.
Okay.
So
Yeah, he knows who he is. Well, he knows who he is as soon as he gets his car.
Yeah.
Once he finds the car, he's able to find the VIN number and figure out who Llewellyn is. And but when he removes the tracer, that's when they have their gunfight, and so he knows what's going on.
Right.
yeah.
But why then? I mean, we would expect if anybody just took the money, right? Probably not somebody who's going to be able to actually take care of themselves and stand up in a gunfight with this kind of almost super powered criminal in Chigurh, right? So what do you think that says about the broader story that Moss was able to kind of stand up to Chigurh? Like it almost kind of gave the sense like, oh, maybe he could get away with this. What did that make you guys think? How do you?
Well, the only way that he would likely, I think this is kind of like how Chigurh's sort of built up, is the only way that he could escape Chigurh is if he killed Chigurh. And so him wounding him sort of would hint at, oh, he's mortal. Like until that point, it seemed like he was unstoppable and that nothing could really stand in his way. But he hurt him. And even Woody Harrelson makes note of that, like, oh, you've seen him and you're still alive. That's
Yeah.
And so I think that we're led to believe that that is the only situation in which he could have made it out. And him wounding him says that it would be possible for him to make it out. But I don't think that him escaping from Chigurh or from getting away from him, I don't think that was ever a possibility.
Why not? I mean, we could imagine in just a real life scenario, guy shoots other guy, it's over. But the movie wasn't told that way. Why should the viewer have known that Moss was never going to make it out?
Well, the idea is like, and though it's speculation on the part of Woody Harrelson, but Woody Harrelson's character, who is a second bounty hunter from the cartel sent to try to collect the money, he is sort of the only insight we have into what Chigurh is like. And so he has sort of a philosophy or theory about him that he tells Llewellyn about. And so he talks about him as sort of this, principled man who would not stop. And even if Llewellyn gave him the money, he would still kill him for the matter of inconvenience. And that he has these sort of higher principles that, though they're not necessarily moral, they are things that he follows, and he follows to the end. And so it's the idea that if he seems like a force that could not be stopped, and there is no stopping him unless he completes his task. So I think that's what was trying to be argued about Chigurh. Now the end of the movie throws a wrench into that potential idea. But do I go there already?
Let's not just yet. I like where you're going. Keep that in mind. But I want to focus on Chigurh's principles.
Question real quick.
Yeah. Go ahead, Devin.
So when did this take place in like what 70s, 80s? Just based on 80s? Okay, yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I would.
It's
so,
1980 exactly, right?
It's 1980 exactly. Okay. So
yeah.
I think this is an important point we can talk about later because I think it kind of plays into the plot as I think about it. But so Ben mentioned the tracker. I don't think that would have been a problem if he had just left because the whole, like, just based on the technology, it was based on proximity and, beeping basically, just, hey, the closer you get, the more it beeps. So if Chigurh didn't have a general location for where he thought Llewellyn was, the tracker wouldn't have been a problem. So I think there's an important thing there with if Llewellyn lacked compassion, basic human compassion, like Chigurh does, he would have just gotten away with the money.
Yeah, so let me explain that because I didn't go over it so much in the summary. So when Llewellyn finds the money, he brings it back home. He finds one last guy surviving who's asking for water.
Yeah.
His conscience gets racked. In the moment, he ignores him. But in the middle of the night, after he's already taken the money home, he's decided to go back and give this guy some water.
Fills up a jug. takes off.
Yeah. So when he goes back out to the scene, he discovers that guy's been shot. And when he looks up to the ridge where his truck is, there's people there who are flattening his tires. This is what, that's when he starts to go on the run. Chigurh later comes to that point. He's able to get his information off of his truck and start tracking him from
Because
there.
he has to leave his truck there. He gets
Yeah,
chased.
so
by
there-
anything. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good point. And I do want to come back around to Llewellyn's decisions and what they mean.
Yeah.
Actually, that could probably tie in well with Chigurh's principles. Because, Ben, you mentioned that we only really get to insight on Chigurh from Carson Wells, Woody Harrelson's character. But that's not exactly true. We get moments with Chigurh. He's that's kind of preachy.
But the only thing that you get about Chigurh is what you get in the moment. I'm saying that predating the occurrences of the film.
Yeah.
That's the thing you get. But even Woody Harrelson, Devin, would argue that, or Carson Wells would argue that, no, Chigurh could find him. And he says by this, like, because Llewellyn's just like, I got rid of the tracer, he's not going to find me. And to which Woody Harrelson's response was, it only took me 3 hours.
Yeah, but he already knew who he was at that point. So that's what I'm arguing. He already knew who he was based on his truck information. And Llewellyn's at this point very much on the run. Had it not been for that, who's to say he couldn't have gone off to his trailer and, ditched the bag and got rid of the money and, moved off to another part of Texas in a nice house with his wife. And just lived his life. If he had not had
sure
compassion
a person
for
who
the guy.
spends his life being able to find people who are trying to live in obscurity would be able to find a person who automatically starts spending millions of dollars. So
Maybe.
I feel
I don't know.
I think what Woody Harrelson's character tries to sort of get at is, even though he is a skill tracker, he's trying to set up Chigurh as the penultimate for what he does.
Yeah.
And so, like, you can think this, Heath Ledger Joker meets Jack Bauer. Like, he's going to find you and he's going to kill you and there's no stopping it. But I think that, I get what you're saying. Like, oh, he could potentially get away. But at that point, he's going to have to also drag his wife and his debilitated mother-in-law into it as well. And so all that in mind, he's not going to move fast enough to really lose Chigurh.
Well, I think it's a really I think they did it intentionally because I think it's an important plot point, and I'll get to it later with Josh Brolin's death, actually. But I think that to answer Josh's question earlier, I think had he chose to basically just say, I don't care if that man lives or dies, I think he would have. That's the only scenario in which he makes it out of this with the money, goes on to live the rest of his life. Because at that point, there wouldn't have been any evidence whatsoever of him having been there for Chigurh to pick up on. It was only because he went back.
Well, let's focus. I want to ask you, because I think you have a point there, Devin. What does Chigurh think about Llewellyn's decisions? And I don't want to force you, don't have anything to say on this, but Isaiah, you've kind of been quiet. What do you think that that Chigurh has had on, like, what's his take on Llewellyn's decisions?
On Llewellyn's decisions?
Yeah.
My assessment of it, and what I will admit is that, like, I'm remembering this from a previous watch before, and so, like, to answer your first question, like, is there any scenario where he gets out of it? Like, I'm even a step before Devin. I think the movie sets it up to where it's like the only way he would have gotten out of this if he hadn't taken it, and so, but as far as, like, what is Chigurh's assessment of Llewellyn? I mean, he seems to be a guy that it's like this mix of like unsolicited justice mixed with chance and stuff like that. And so, as far as what he thinks of him, I'm not necessarily sure, but I think he's kind of one of those like, hey, like, this is going to happen, and I'm going, like, there's no getting out of this. But as far as if he's a fan of his choices or not, who knows?
Well, he probably respects him more than the gas station attendant.
Yeah. Well, let's focus on that, because we learned something about Chigurh during that. So before Chigurh ever starts going after Llewellyn, he's filling up gas after brutally killing a couple people, which, if you're going to watch this movie, you better get used to brutal violence.
Yeah.
Not a reason not to watch it.
Not over the top, though. It's not
over
gory.
It is, but
unorthodox.
It can be very sudden. Yeah. And very.
Well, that dude in the hotel room who got his arm shot off, like, that's
Oh yeah,
Crazy.
Yeah, but it's
and that oxygen tank was not for emphysema. That was
Not effectively.
So in the scene, he's going up to fill up gas, and basically he just gets annoyed by this gas station attendant who's making small talk,
yeah.
and he ends up flipping a coin and asking him to call it. And what we learn in the movie is he's basically saying that even though the attendant doesn't know this, he's saying, call it right and you get to live. And they have this conversation where the attendant clearly doesn't understand what's going on naturally. He's like, I didn't put anything up. And Chigurh says, yes, you have. You've been putting it up all of your life. There's this sense that, and before that, they kind of talked about their life and stuff. And you should go look up the gas station scene because it's
watch it with Kevin James because he nails it.
Yeah. There's a great Kevin James does some humorous things where he's the sound guy in famous films. But there's a sense that, like, I mean, what does Chigurh think about? I was talking about Llewellyn's decisions earlier, but what does Chigurh think about anybody's decisions in life?
Well, so asking it that way, because I think about the gas station scene. I also think about that scene with the lady that won't call it, and so like there's this.
So Carla Jean,
she won't call
Llewellyn's wife.
Well, I'm sorry. Keep going.
All I was gonna say is like just taking a look at those two instances where he like does the coin, and you have a guy that like it's almost like he gives this chance, but then like not choosing. It's like this weird thing, I guess. Like how does he look at people's decisions in lives? Like it's almost like he's saying they matter. Your decisions matter. Yeah. All your decisions leading up to now. At some point they matter, even to the point of life and death. But that like you don't get to not choose. You don't have the luxury of not choosing, because not choosing is automatic loss in his equation. And so like I think he very much weighs in the choices of people. They're a big thing to him, because regardless of what he thinks and how annoyed he may be and what his intentions are, it's up to the person in the end. Is kind of like based on how he handles
everything's up to the person except for the final thing, right?
Yes. Death. So
death.
But if they choose right,
then for now,
For now,
right.
Yeah. So for him, I think I agree that he thinks that their decisions matter, but ultimately, I don't think he doesn't value any. He's very much a sociopath. So he doesn't really value human life, and he doesn't think that your life ultimately matters. And so for him, if the coin lands on whatever you call that as a.
I'm not getting any.
Uh-oh.
Is Devin going slow or am I going slow?
No, that's Devin.
Okay. It's not me this time.
With
Yay!
the gas station attendant.
Yes.
It seems like
Well, I'll just say yes.
This is the part.
No, it's just my internet connection isn't stable. Okay.
You're
Nobody
good.
got any?
Yeah.
I didn't catch any of that.
I heard
little
gas
bit of it.
station attendant.
But it sounded like you were leading up to something great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with the gas station attendant, it seems like the thing that set him off the most.
Yeah, for
he's
sure.
already annoyed up to this point, but the thing that sets him off the most.
I really want to hear this point, actually. The thing that sets him off the most.
Yeah, the thing that sets him off the most is when he asks him, "Is this your gas station?" And he says, "Oh, well, no. So you came into it through marriage? It's his wife's father's, right? It's the former father-in-law's gas station.
Father's place.
He inherited it, and they just, And that's like the thing that really sets him off is that you didn't even earn this. You didn't earn your keep,
Yeah.
Well, honestly, I would go a step further. I think that some of the things that, in a reoccurring way, that annoy him, like throughout it, is trivial small talk. Like he hates it so much. So
like that's how this guy's got to spend his life. He marries into a small gas station in the middle of nowhere and just randomly talks small talk.
Well, you see it a couple places. You see it with that guy. He's just like, "Are you from Dallas?" And he just hates that. And then he hates it with the guy he kills, who has the chickens in the back of the truck.
Yeah.
And he's just like, he's like, where would you, if you were flying somewhere, where would you go? And he just goes, you looking for an airport or an airstrip? And he just goes, whatever. He's like, well, it depends on where you're going.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and I love how they do though. Well, are you looking for an airport, an airstrip? Well, where are you going?
Not to jump too much into the cinematography yet, but I love sort of how the Coen brothers, whenever there's something that takes place in a very unique area, that they immerse themselves into somewhat of an over-the-top characterization of the area. Like if you look at Fargo, like you get this like over-the-top sense of what that place was like, while still at the same time not being so over the top that you alienate the people who are actually from there. Instead, people who are from there would probably be like, yeah, that's us. And so for us, it almost looks like it cartoonish. Like, wow, are they really that dry? Or are they really that, melancholy? But then like I have family in West Texas and I go there. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my granny's boyfriend.
Well, and on that, have you ever seen a Coen brothers like minor side character that only appears in one scene that you didn't remember? I mean, the gas station attendant, the chicken truck guy, the apartment, the trailer park manager.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's like just filing her nails. Like
everybody in Fargo. Everybody.
One of the things that stuck out to me.
Though.
This isn't really about like the movie or any of the depth in the movie, but like all I kept thinking about was that this is like surely more than $2 million was spent trying to get back $2 million with all of the stuff that they were doing. Like I just kept thinking, I was just like, how much money did they have to spend to send that guy out, and then to send this guy? And I was like, at some point, what point is this not about like $2 million?
Yeah, well, but like I mean, if y'all listening haven't understood at this point, I mean, it's not like Javier, it's not like Chigurh is any kind of normal pay for hire assassin. I mean, he's got his own. He's going to do the job, but he's much more concerned about following his own laws than. And so one of the things
he's set his.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, once he sent his mind to something, he's not going to let go of it. And Woody Harrelson again gets to that, like he's just like he'll kill you just for inconveniencing him, is what he said.
Right.
To Llewellyn. And so the fact that he has a task in mind that he has to complete means that for him, you actually can't put a price on $2 million. You could is the principle of you have that, you're not supposed to have that, and I'm supposed to kill you to get it away from you. And that principle does not have a monetary value for Chigurh. He is obsessed.
For sure. Like and that's what I love about it is like that they take the MacGuffin and they make it not $20 million, it's $2 million, you know?
Yeah. Well, and think about like with Llewellyn, Chigurh never plays around like he has a chance. Mm-hmm. You can see with the gas station attendant, the guy he's just annoyed with in the middle of nowhere, he leaves it up to the coin toss, to fate. But with Llewellyn's decision, remember after their shootout, they're having a conversation over the phone where Llewellyn's trying to call Carson, but because Carson got in the way, Chigurh goes and kills him, which I could have a whole conversation on how Carson knows everything there is to know about Chigurh, yet is totally unprepared to actually deal with him. And in their conversation, though, Chigurh tells him, look, you're done. Like you have no options left. You know how this is going to end. And he tells him, look, I'm not coming after you. I'm gonna go after your wife. So you can give her a chance if you just come bring the money to me. I'll kill you because you've already set your decisions. But your wife's going to be accountable if you don't agree to help me. And so one of the things I wanted to ask was, Llewellyn fights this the whole time. As soon as he takes the money, he's fighting, trying to survive. And at some points it's succeeding and it kind of builds up like, oh, we're going to have this ultimate shootout. But of course it doesn't work out. How does it turn out for the people around Llewellyn that he's fighting what Chigurh sees as his sealed fate?
Interesting point. Yeah. It's chaos for them. But so I'm picking up, I guess, what your original question was, is how does Chigurh see Llewellyn's decisions, and I guess he sees his decisions as just further sealing his fate. And so the more Llewellyn seems to struggle and prolong his own fate, because that's all he does. He doesn't get away with it. He doesn't live. He just prolongs his own fate.
Yeah.
The more he does that, the worse it gets for the people involved in his life.
Well,
Yeah, so
one of the
what's the kill count that Llewellyn's responsible for? I mean, if we think about it.
Grandma or mother-in-law.
Well, grandma dies of cancer.
Oh, she does. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, think about
what is it?
in Eagle Pass, the hotel attendant,
Yeah. Okay.
the guy whose car he gets in, who gets immediately shot. To an extent, Carson Wells, although he's certainly punched his number a few
every
times.
cartel member that Chigurh killed
Yeah.
technically
Which,
would not.
that's
have
the
been
other
killed.
thing is this is the kind of unique area. And I actually read a little something on this in the book. It's more clear. So Chigurh is actually hired, as well as Carson Wells. They're hired by a bank in Houston because back in 1980, this is before the cartels really got formed. There's a lot of like country boy financiers doing drug deals, buying the cocaine from Mexicans. And so that's why you have Mexicans and kind of the rich rednecks from Houston.
Yeah.
They're not rednecks. They're just Texan. So,
Well, I mean, they're mad because they have neither the
Coen
product
brothers,
or
Coen
the
brothers
money.
characters, the rednecks, all right? Yeah, but that's why Chigurh even turns on them because his whole thing, and he goes and kills the guy who hired him because he's like, you only hire one tool.
oh yeah, the guy
So-
from Office Space. Yeah,
Yeah, the guy from Office Space, from every other Coen brothers movie, Pan Shot. If you've seen Buster Scruggs, you should go. You also
Oh
watch
no,
Buster
I have seen Buster
On
Scruggs.
Netflix.
Man, that was.
You remember Pan Shot? Pan Shot with the James Franco one.
the James Franco one was the best.
Yeah, that's
Just
so
purely for the scene of first time.
yeah.
That was great.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get us too far afield there, but yeah, Chigurh ends up killing a bunch of people who he thinks crossed his rule outside of Llewellyn, but
4, 5, 6. So,
yeah, and ultimately Carla
Seven.
Jean, right, his wife.
yeah, ultimately his wife. Yeah.
Llewellyn would rather try to face Chigurh on. He is so confident that he can come and face him and take him on that not only does he not know the strangers around him who pay the price, but Chigurh, long after this is all over, goes up and kills his wife because she
Yeah.
was held accountable. And like we mentioned earlier, just because he gives her a chance at the end, like, I'll flip a coin. It's the best I can do, he says.
She
As
refused
if-
to play his game.
Yeah, it's he can leave it up to fate, but she won't play it. And that's not an option, though. Why is that not an option? I want to float that out there.
why is it not a real option for her to flip the coin?
No, yeah, to reject the game. He tells her to call it. We see the gas station clerk. He called it, and he was right.
Yeah.
But why is it not an option for Chigurh for somebody to reject the game?
Because even though people don't matter, their choices do, and you have to make a choice. So
Yeah.
in Chigurh's mind, there's no such thing as true neutrality. You make decisions. You always make a choice. There's no such thing as being neutral, and so you see that even with Llewellyn, like the way the movie portrays Llewellyn is his decisions matter, but he does not. And here's what I mean by that. So you see him do things throughout the whole movie, and he's even having that last conversation where he's just like he's waiting for what's coming. All right, but you don't see him die on screen. It's off screen that he dies. And so his death in itself, like him dying, does not matter. But the choices that he took to get to that point do. And so,
You could say his
In the-
death was inevitable even outside of Chigurh.
correct. And so because of his choices, because of his decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is that sort of, like, if there's three recurring themes, it's fate, versus your choices and then your consequences. And so those three things are through and through that if you do this, there are going to be consequences for your actions. And even Chigurh has to face consequences because had he not gone to kill Carla Jean, he would have not have gotten into the wreck he does at the end of the film.
Exactly.
And
Which
so
I can't remember if it's in the film or not. The book is obviously more detailed. It actually matches, if anybody's interested, matches the movie really well because Cormac McCarthy originally wrote it as a screenplay, couldn't sell it, made the book, then it got adapted. But
As one
Carson
does.
Wells, I know in the book tells Chigurh, you're not outside of death. So we do get the idea that Chigurh is a person.
Yeah.
And despite him maybe being an arbiter for fate, he's not outside of it, which
as an
leads to the
instrument.
random car accident he's in. But he doesn't face justice, though, right? He's still
What is
still gets away.
What is justice?
like
Way, but maybe
Like
break
for-
it out a little bit.
like Chigurh's idea? Well, Chigurh's idea of justice is not necessarily the same thing, and so
That's true.
So if you want to talk about like what is right and what is just, the three main characters are all going to have a different perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
Tommy Lee
Well-
Jones is going to have a different perspective.
So-
and so go ahead.
Can I pivot off of that? I want to talk about Tommy Lee because we went through this whole conversation talking about just Llewellyn and Chigurh.
Real quick, before we do that,
Yeah.
I'll make one more final point on Llewellyn's death. So there's another. So right before that, he's met by a woman at the pool, who's kicking back, having a couple beers in a bikini.
Another person who dies because of him.
Yeah, and she invites
That's right.
him to come and join her, and he, being he stays consistent with like kind of his just being he's a moral man, and he stays consistent with that throughout the whole movie, and so he denies that invitation. He says, I'm a married man, I don't think that'd be the best idea. And had he not done that, just like had he not brought water to the man in the beginning, he probably could have avoided death at least for a little bit longer there, because the Mexican cartel or whatever, he was shot in his room, so he wouldn't have been in his room at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe you would have seen him pull up in the parking lot.
Well, and I do want to comment on that because I have a quote written down. I'm glad you brought that up. I was almost going to skip over that. Yeah, there's this woman, which I don't want to be that guy. It's much more detailed in the book. It's not just this one scene, but the scene in the movie, I thought a long time on this for this particular conversation. When the girl asked him first, "What are you doing?" And Llewellyn says, does anybody remember what he says?
Waiting
That's
for
one of-
what's coming.
Trying to get out of the way of what's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which,
Yeah. There was an opportunity right there.
how has all that worked out this whole movie?
Hmm.
Not well.
Yeah.
And I think she says, no way of knowing what's coming. Which, by the way, if this is your first time as the audience, you might think, oh, Chigurh's coming. Nope, just another random group of assassins from the cartel.
Just
Yeah.
death.
Went and got him. Oh, and by the way, before I want to focus on Sheriff Bell's story in just a sec, but as a cinematography note, did you guys notice how the Coen brothers tell us that Chigurh kills Carla Jean? Because we don't see it on screen.
Oh, just the boots.
Yeah. Ben explained that because this is the subtlety of their cinematic storytelling that I think just really puts them up there with all the modern people. So explain, what do you mean by the boots?
Well, so repeatedly throughout the film, there's like you see him being very careful about blood and his shoes or blood on the carpet. And so when he goes to kill the cartel guys to try to get the case from the first hotel room, he takes off his boots and then enters the room, and then he takes off his socks after he does kill him, and so that where there's no blood. And then later, whenever he is in his whenever he kills Carson Wells, and his blood is starting to pour onto the floor, he picks his boots up to make sure that he doesn't get them on him. And so you don't see him kill her. You just see him tell her that she has to make a choice about the coin toss. And then she says, no, it's your choice whether or not to kill me. It's not up to the coin. You choose to kill me whether or not. And then you don't see how that ends, but you just see him walk out of her house, and then as he steps out the door, he checks the bottom of his boots.
Yeah, I love that so much. And there's so many things throughout the movie. Like, if you're not paying attention, it can be like, how does he keep finding Llewellyn all this time? And it's literally they'll give a 1 second visual cue on so many. That's how they tell the story.
Yeah.
They rarely just tell you things. You don't figure things out through dialogue. You've really got to be watching the movie. But yeah, I love that moment. So let's talk about Sheriff Bell's story. So Bell, older sheriff, Tommy Lee Jones is, I mean, this is probably second to his role as Two-Face, as all-time greatest roles for him. You know,
Not K, not Agent K.
yeah. Oh, dude, it's so much better than Agent K. But he is constantly in pursuit of trying to save Llewellyn. He knows the trouble that's coming his way. There's a, well, where do I want to start with this? First of all, what's kind of the idea you get from Sheriff Bell of how he is as an investigator?
Well, he's very vocal about the fact that he does not understand the world that's around him anymore.
Elaborate on that. What about it?
He has a couple of times where he's talking to the younger deputy and he's just talking about the brutality of some of these cartel killings, and how that's just something that was not around during his day, his youth. And I think at one point he even mentions that sheriffs back then didn't even have to carry a gun or something like that.
Opening monologue, right?
Yeah. And so he's more and more perplexed, I guess, just about the brutality of the violence that he sees nowadays. And I mean, he is an old man, and I mean, the name of the movie is No Country for Old Men. And so I think it's him progressively realizing that, man, I'm just not cut out for this anymore.
Yeah. So how do we, and let's pause right there because we're going to come exactly back to that. Because he has all these anecdotal stories from his own experience, from what he's hearing from what another older sheriff in a conversation he has, to stories he reads in the news. He's just totally stunned by the depravity of the world and just things have changed so fast. He just can't comprehend what to do. But none of that is what leads to him quitting. It's Llewellyn's story. And so what's kind of the progression? Well, how do you see those ideas of Sheriff Bell being at a loss of what the world has come to, paralleled with his experience following Llewellyn, trying to find him, trying to save him, and of course discovering all the things along the way?
Ben, Isaiah? Tough question.
You're that kid in class, aren't you? So are you trying to discuss like the cause and effect between his retirement and Llewellyn's story? Is that basically what you're trying to get at?
Well, what about Llewellyn's story is kind of that, I mean, it's not the straw that broke the camel's back. It's way more significant than any of these other stories he's talked about, right?
Well, I would say, I mean, this may be a long shot, but like thinking through it, because like the ending is the big thing for me with the sheriff's story, you know, that like I was exactly, and I don't want to jump into that, but like I think I'd say potentially a part of Llewellyn's story that might have been intriguing to him is almost as they're like a glimmer of hope, maybe, you know, because we talked about how like he almost, you know, dodging the inevitable, you know, continuing to go on, and it's almost like what he's looking for, you know, because his arc is essentially coming to terms that you're done, man, you're done, old man. And I'll save my thoughts on the end, his interaction with his father, I think.
No, his uncle.
But like I think part of it that might have been compelling was just this like kind of hope for the future, you know, and that like maybe you can change, or maybe you can dodge what's inevitable, but then at the same time becomes what breaks the camel's back, because he's like, oh
yeah,
you
very
can't.
violently, very suddenly.
Yeah, he's like, oh no, there's no chance.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to put it. Devin?
Any of y'all ever seen Mystic River, also with Tommy Lee Jones? Oh, go watch it. Seriously, it's a great movie. But his
right now, okay, see you guys later.
Yeah.
No, his character is.
We'll keep the recording running. We're just all going to go watch the movie in the other room.
It's actually, I'm just realizing it now, but his character is shockingly similar to his character in this movie, where he's an old man, he's a sheriff, he doesn't quite understand what he's seeing, and there's even some stuff where he has these vivid dreams of his like great grandfather in the Civil War, and he has these conversations with him and stuff like that.
Oh wow,
it's kind of like in Men in Black 2 when
And one of those had
He's
Josh
the old-
Brolin in it.
He's the old guy, and he
Oh
doesn't
my
remember
gosh,
his
is he
past.
Llewellyn? Did he get inverted?
Oh my gosh.
Hey, John Goodman plays
Yes.
a Louisiana gangster, Louisiana mafia in Mystic River. If you haven't seen it, so
Oh,
Nice.
no,
Anyway,
for real, Josh, go watch it. I think you'd like it, especially if you like this
I'll have
movie.
to check it out. I've never heard of it.
but that'd just be one of my things. I think and it may be a reach out. I'm interested to hear what y'all think. But I think that might have been what was compelling about Llewellyn's story. It might have been a glimmer of hope for him in his future.
Yeah, because think about the question I asked y'all, like the kind of guiding principle I wanted you to watch the movie by was, what's the relation between Sheriff Bell's story and Llewellyn's story? And Isaiah, I think you're really hitting on it there. In one sense, right? We've talked about. I mean, Llewellyn's fate was sealed when he stole that $2 million, or when he went to give the water back. We can differ there,
Yeah.
but his fate was sealed, and he was told that over and over and over again. And he tried to fight it, and even in a way he didn't expect, his time was done. But the whole time we're hoping. Can he get out? Can he fight it? So Tommy Lee Jones is following him. He's hoping that he can find him and save him. Maybe this will be the different thing. But it's not that. Just as Llewellyn never really learns, I guess you could say. But Tommy Lee Jones does. But he thinks, kind of throughout the movie, right? We've said the world has changed too much for him.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you though, and thinking towards the end here, is it that the world has changed? Does the movie tell us the world has changed? That's the problem.
I think two things. One, I think that the conversation that he has with the other law enforcement agent after Llewellyn's death insinuates that they believe that the world has changed around them, and also that they're getting older. It's just like whenever they stop saying sir and ma'am and just all this stuff.
Right.
And so they're talking about how bad things have become. And, but at the same time, that's not necessarily true, that it's that the world has gotten bad. That's just sort of the excuse they give. Because when he's having the conversation with his uncle, who was shot on the job, and talks about his uncle, who was a law enforcement agent who was killed on his front porch, that based off of that career path, that it doesn't matter what the world is like, that could be something that kills you. And one of the things I think that you can, it was a clever quip, but if you look at it in relation to Tommy Lee Jones' story, it might relate. Now, whenever they found the cartel members who were dead, and because they were shot by Chigurh, how does Tommy Lee Jones say they died? Says they died by natural causes. And the deputy's like, how do you mean? He just goes, it was natural based off of their life choices.
Yeah.
And
Natural
so,
to the line of work they was in.
line of work they were in, and what line of work is Tommy Lee Jones in? And so, so Tommy Lee Jones's his line of work, if you look at his uncle and his great uncle, that no matter
great uncle who
what,
died in 1909, so
yes,
well before the old timers in his perspective.
Right. So either way, he's trying to use the excuse that times have changed and things have gotten bad, but history would show that the older you get, the more likely the world is going to try to kill you, regardless of how bad the world seems to be getting.
So I mentioned before in the scene where Llewellyn goes up to that girl at the motel, she asks him, what are you doing? He says, trying to get out of the way of what's coming. When Uncle Ellis is talking to Tommy Lee Jones, one of the last things he says is, you can't stop what's coming. It ain't all waiting on you. That's vanity.
Right.
So we've said, it's not that the Uncle Ellis conversation shows us. Tommy Lee Jones is mistaken to think that the world is more violent. There's been horrific violence going back to his great uncle and forever.
Yeah.
Uncle Ellis is suggesting to him, you're trying to stop what's coming, which is what Llewellyn was doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is Sheriff Bell fighting?
Death.
I think he's just
Yeah.
fighting the inevitable. I mean, like that quote from his uncle is the big thing that stuck out to me in that interaction. When I was going back and just trying to watch some of the clips to refresh my memory about this movie, like that you can't stop it, and it's kind of like if you've ever had something that happens, you're like, I can't believe I did that, and it and it had this effect, and your parent or whatever is like, oh honey, like you're not that important, and it's just like, I think that's the part that he's like, he has this idea that like things are just so crazy, and that's why maybe I'm done, or and his uncle just kind of sets things into perspective, like you said, better or worse than the past, whatever. Like this isn't, you are not as big a factor in the overall in this as you may think you are.
Well, and it's you also can't do this anymore because your time's over.
Yeah, not
Like
because
you
things
said,
are harder.
Devin, it's No Country for Old Men. And so the point is not, it's not an anti-geriatric message. All right. The point is that you can't fight death. What's the most clear example of that is the story of Llewellyn.
Yeah.
In a much more explosive, violent, and dramatic way. But
I like that.
In his own way, Tommy Lee Jones Sheriff Bell is fighting death. But just as it was inevitable from Llewellyn picking up that $2 million, it's inevitable for all of us as soon as you're born. Now,
So here's a question that I have then.
Yeah.
Like, so, we have three main characters here. What's the inevitability for Chigurh's character? Or is he just the person? Well, I mean, like, just, but I mean, like, just for his character arc, like, or is he just the person that brings to light that for Llewellyn and for the sheriff?
I think he's the person who brings that to light. I think he is more or less correct. Like, I mean, in the eyes of the story, he is kind of the sword of fate. And that's certainly how he sees himself. That he's the one who is he's the only one with the correct philosophy. He's never trying to fight it.
Who's to say that his is really necessarily correct? Because he's trying to fight death too.
Yeah.
In different. So just because, he acknowledges that people's like choices, have consequences, and that he feels like he's the agent of, I don't know, justice or whatever. But he's still trying to escape consequence throughout the rest of the film, mainly at the end.
At the end, I think is a great moment to show us that he is just a person. He's not outside of death. But a lot of the times that he's escaping things, it's just to keep doing what he's doing. I mean, it's almost as though he's not a character or a person, but a force. Now, that's not true all the way through. But like everything he says to Llewellyn, like everything that he tells him about the certainty, like this is what's going to happen to you, he's right. And it does come to pass.
Right.
Even if he didn't fully, is not this actual angel of death or anything. He practically is.
Can I do some verbal processing real quick?
No.
All right. So with Llewellyn, I think throughout the movie, everybody that comes across him gets this, general feel that he's a good man. Maybe he's made some bad decisions here, but he's a good man. And ultimately, it's because of some of the good decisions that he made that he ends up kind of, sealing his fate. Whereas Chigurh is kind of very much the opposite. He's very cold, very calculating. Llewellyn is very much just kind of flying by the seat of his pants, just winging it, just trying to get away. But I don't know. I got this I started on this like train of thought of kind of just like survival of the fittest. Like, Chigurh is, shows no compassion for anybody, while Llewellyn does. And ultimately Llewellyn dies before Chigurh does. And Chigurh actually, he makes it out of that thing. But with this element of like fate in there that, like by doing the right thing, Llewellyn ended up dying earlier. And by just being a sociopath, I mean, who knows how many gunfights Chigurh has been in at this point, and he's, continued to make it through. But with that violent car crash at the end, it is that message where Chigurh sees himself as an instrument of fate, but it's like, that was very much like it's coming for him too, and it could happen literally at any moment. Just
right.
Well,
I
think between the three characters, what you see is sort of there's that overarching question of just like, well, is, are they suffering these things because they've made bad choices? And so, like, you look at all of them, and like, yeah, you say Llewellyn was like a good person, but he's going through all of this because he decided to take the money and not help give water to the person.
And
Okay?
he is he recklessly endangers knowingly certain people's lives.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the sheriff, he doesn't necessarily do anything wrong. He does everything right, so maybe too slowly, but he gets through the movie with his life. Like, even his hesitations save him, because whenever he goes into the room that Chigurh was still in,
When he revisits the scene of
Hesitation.
Llewellyn's death, yeah.
yeah, his hesitation saves his life. But then you go one step further, and Chigurh, technically doing everything right, he's going down the intersection and he sees an obviously green light. Life hits him and he gets T-boned at the intersection. And so even though he did everything right, that did not still stop what was coming. And so it seems like this idea that everything is fated. Beyond your choices, beyond how good or bad you are, everything is fated, seems to be a recurring thing. And I think that's even maybe alluded to in Tommy Lee Jones' dream at the end, which is probably the most interesting. Like, that's the most debatable part.
I would like to talk about the dream, but are we ready to move? Because I do think, Ben, I think that your assessment kind of hits it the most, because there's a sense that we have free choice within the confines of the ultimate fate of death.
Yeah.
Now, some choices can lead to that, but it's not necessarily dependent on, are they good or bad choices? It is just choices. Again, this is why Chigurh is almost to the point of thinking that he should kill the gas station clerk, because it seems to come to the opinion that he's just wasted his life and maybe now it's time. Turns out not the case. And you can't really look at that guy's story and say, well, was any of that good or bad? No, it's just everything. He's been putting up everything this whole time. His whole life he's been putting it up. And so it is certain choices.
So based on choices, Llewellyn dies a violent death as still a fairly young man, where the sheriff goes on to probably die an old man peacefully, So
well, and that, I think that's also in part because I think we're supposed to look at, like, we're not really going to relate in detail to Llewellyn's story, right? I mean, none of us are on the run with drug money. But maybe I'm wrong. Yeah. But our experience of death is going to be much more like Sheriff Bell's, in that, and I think that I struggled. I'm going to say this just very broadly. To me, the story of Llewellyn is kind of a parable for Sheriff Bell to understand his own acceptance of fate. And with that, I want to go to the final dream. I'm going to read the description of the dream, if you guys don't mind sitting through that. It's not very long.
Yeah, good.
So this is the very last scene of the movie. It's probably my favorite scene in film. I think Tommy Lee Jones is so great at this. But he's telling his wife a couple dreams he's had. I'm going to tell you the second one. The first one he doesn't remember too well. But listen to this second one. It was like, he's talking about him and his father. It was like we was both back in older times, and I was on horseback going through the mountains of a night, going through this pass in the mountains. It was cold, and there was snow on the ground, and he rode past me and kept on going. Never said nothing going by. He just rode on past. And he had his blanket wrapped around him and his head down. And when he rode past, I seen he was carrying fire and a horn the way people used to do. Oh, sorry, my screen blacked out. The way people used to do. And I could see the horn from the light inside of it, about the color of the moon. And in the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead, and he was fixing to make a fire somewhere out in all that dark and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he would be there. And then I woke up, to which we cut to black to the sound of a clock ticking. Oh my gosh. Like,
I love this scene.
And not to mention the 2 seconds after he says that, of him just kind of sitting there, barely trembling before the cut to black, is just so. The reason I bring this up, well, it's the last scene. It's probably the most important lines of the movie. What do you guys make of this dream? Let's just start there.
You shouldn't eat junk food before bed.
Well, he has two dreams, right? Like he tells his wife about two dreams.
Yeah, the first dream he goes into town. They're both about his father. The first dream he goes into town. He thinks he's supposed to meet his dad, and he thinks he gave him money, or his dad gave him money. He thinks he lost it.
All right.
So I remember.
Which I think is pretty widely agreed upon. Like this is just him reflecting on the fact that he lost the as far as the case goes. He didn't succeed. The second dream is the big one. I just wanted to there are two dreams in this final scene that he tells his wife about.
So
yeah, no, it's good. It's good that we hit on that.
The way I take the second dream is that his father goes on ahead of him. He's cold. He's clearly not having a good time. He's just trying to hold on to this little bit of warmth that he has. And so I kind of take it as, they're on this path of life, and life is suffering. It's cold. It's harsh. And he doesn't know how far up ahead his father is, but he knows that when he gets there, his father's going to have a fire for him and it's going to be warm. And so I kind of take that as just this kind of parable of the fact that life is suffering. But ultimately there is an end goal that we're trying to get to. And that when we get there, we know that there's going to be a place that's already prepared for us, and it's going to be warm, and it's going to be better than where we are now. Just trying to hold on to our little horn full of fire, and get a little bit of warmth from it. That's how I took it. But again, trying to always bring theology into it.
Well, and just well, hold on. Where is that place that his father is? You think, in a literal like if we just interpret the dream.
Just interpret the dream.
Yeah.
Where
is that place?
Wherever he sees fit to. Okay, it's time to stop and rest. So I take it.
Okay, let's keep going then.
So for me,
No. I want to comment on this, but I want us to all get our thoughts out.
Yeah, and so I think there's definitely especially for Christians, obviously there's the idea of where we will spend eternity when we die, and the thoughts. And I think Devin, you're totally on with that, and I think that maybe what Josh was hinting at. For me, it's the Coen brothers, right? So this is they Coen brothered this scene, and that's why it's so widely loved and hated all at the same time. I usually
just about word for word from the novel, which is
great, right? I love the way you talked about the history of this was written as a screenplay, became a book, then adapted, and so it has there's some opportunities for the film to really get at the heart of what the original work was. For me, it's one of those where it's that glimmer of hope that we finally just conceded doesn't exist anymore, given back to the sheriff, to Tommy Lee's character, in this way. So I think the imagery of his father, who had previously retired and now he's going ahead. If you look at the context of where we're at here, he's essentially just come to terms that he's done, just like Llewellyn. Inevitable. The inevitability of being done is finally here, and I think he's finally coming to terms about that. And then he wakes up before he actually gets to his father, and so I think the ambiguous ending kind of hints at maybe there's some life left to be, left to be lived. What does that mean in regards to
his father in real life?
What's that?
Dead.
And that's my point.
Ever was.
Yeah, and I think at the beginning, the first part of the dream, I think as he's telling his wife about this, it's I think he's almost interpreting the dream as okay, hey, that's where my father is. He retired. He's dead. That's where it's going to be for me too. So maybe not death, but even just the understanding of okay, that's where I'm going to. And then he doesn't make it there in the dream. Wakes up, And so for me, to probably dig further into it than was intended. I see this as kind of that little wink, hey, I know we just pretty much took you on this journey of accepting the end, but it's not over yet.
Well, and let's go to Ben. I want to get Ben's thoughts because I do want to share and ask more. But
I think really the crux of even Tommy Lee Jones' interpretation of his dream is at the end when he says, "But then I woke up," and then I woke up. And so, yeah, you might have this potentially hopeful, optimistic sort of vibe that it's cold here, but there's something warm and comforting there, that my father has gone ahead of me to
prepare.
Yes, to prepare. How about that?
Yeah.
But
certainly in the dream, right? That's why you carry fire in a horn, is to transport it from one place to go set it somewhere else.
But one thing that we see is that he never actually sees his father set it up. His dad goes ahead of him, but he actually never actually gets there in the dream, right? And so even if there's a message behind that, like you were getting to, Devin, he never even gets to see that in the dream. But then the second thing, which is almost more painful than that, is that he wakes up realizing, but it was just a dream. And so he's been sort of hurt and burned by the fact that he was kind of optimistic, like, I could save Llewellyn. I could save Llewellyn. I could do this. I can accomplish this. That there's something good that's going to happen. And then he couldn't. And so that dream may have been a little bit better had he actually been able to make it to the destination that was going to be good and warm. But he doesn't even do that. And then on top of it, and then I woke up. And so even if that's hopeful and even if that's good, that's not real.
Well, let me ask you this.
Change everything.
Why what could be a reason that he does not reach where his father is in the dream?
I think the part of that is, like, again, his father's been dead for years.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that his father's ahead of him and he knows there's going to be something there when he gets there, I think it's just subconsciously hinting at, and I think that there's the comfort whether he gets there. I don't think he gets there because he's not dead yet.
Yeah.
I think the dream is just trying to say that, like, hey, when there's going to be a reunion, I'm going to see my dad. I'll be there eventually when I die. For me, I guess, just to kind of maybe explain it in a better way, the glimmer of hope in the fact that he wakes up is just that, like, hey, that'll be there eventually. But I think, like, as a person who's maybe getting to that point where it's like, I think him waking up is like, oh, but I'm not there yet. Like, and so now there's still some distance to be traveled. I don't think it's a depressing thing that he doesn't get there. I think it's just assumed that, like, I know there's going to be, it'll be there when I get there. But then I wake up. Now what?
And that's exactly where I am. And so this is kind of, this is my thoughts. Because remember, the whole movie is we're watching someone fight fate, fight their ultimate doom to their utter destruction. We come to learn that even the peaceable sheriff is doing the exact same thing. I think the dream, and this, I'm going to cheat a little, and Cormac McCarthy is very big on subconscious realization. I think the dream is Sheriff Bell's subconscious realization that he finally accepts death. I don't know if he's consciously there yet, but the dream shows that he understands, hey, the fact that he's 20 years older than his father only emphasizes more his current predicament. That his father has gone ahead into the cold, into the dark, suggests this is his father going ahead in death, but that he has a fire. And he says, I knew that he'd be there when I knew he'd be ahead when I got there. That it suggests that he has accepted, my time's coming soon. I can't fight this any longer. I'm still here. That's why he woke up. But at the end of the day, it's okay. Yeah. It's okay that this is no country for old men. In the end, there is something hopeful.
Yeah.
Although that hope only comes after accepting the brutal, brutal reality of the world.
Yeah.
That the only fate each of us has, that we can all be certain of,
I could really see it going both ways. I could see it as kind of a, if you want a hopeful ending, then that's your ending right there. But I could see it going the other way, where I think Ben was hinting at with, and then I woke up. The "and then I woke up" statement is kind of consistent with earlier when he says, "I always thought when I got older in life I'd find God, and then I didn't." And so I could see it as it's kind of it leaves it ambiguous for you. And so I personally, I hope that he goes on hoping that, like Isaiah said, maybe, and then I woke up, it can be interpreted as, well, I'm not dead yet. I've still got some life left in me. But I know when I do die, I've accepted that. And I'm hoping that there's going to be a warm place prepared by my father up ahead of me. Or it could be that very nihilistic way. And then I woke up and I realized that was a dream and it wasn't real.
If I could play my cheat card again, this is a movie we're talking about, not books, but being a deep reader of Cormac McCarthy, always a brutal, very violent, grim world. I think people totally miss on the hopeful aspect that's in just about all of his novels of, if you can accept the realities of the world, and you have to accept them, it is not nihilistic. I mean, one of his one of his most depressing. People think The Road is depressing. Go read Blood Meridian. That's something that can never be made into a movie. I mean, it's just full of Anton Chigurhs where you're like, are these even characters? Like it's really, I mean, it's really rough. But in all of those works, there's this tinge of if you can accept what's going on here and accept your fate, and also accept the consequences of your decisions, there is hope. This should not be something that we despair.
I just had a thought.
Go ahead.
Because I'm still like, I've been in my mind, like, as we've unpacked this for me, like, I'm still most intrigued with Chigurh. Like, and I'm willing to accept and it, you know, and accept that, like, he's the person that he's the tool used to bring this, you know, theme to light and to the surface and hyper focus on it and stuff like that. But like you said, he's still a person. And so like I've always, like, one of the big things for me, his biggest scene is with Llewellyn's wife. What's her name again?
Carla Jean.
Carla Jean. Like there's that line. I was trying to pull up the scene because I remember her saying something about it, but like, you know, she pipes back and like she's like, the coin had, like, there's no chance, like the coin has nothing to do with this. And he says, like, I got here the same way the coin.
You guys
got
aren't
here.
using the dialectic. The coin ain't got no say. That's the line.
Well, yeah. But he's like the coin got here just as I did, and so you all, like, I'm always looking at him as the person, you know, trying to not let him get by without having to wrestle with some of these things, like the choices that he essentially is trying to dodge making. Like what's the fate that he, because I think you're spot on. I think that's the if any application to be taken from this movie, it's the accepting of fate, like accepting what is inevitable allows for hope in the future. And like you just see a guy who's not willing to accept it. Like whether he sees himself as like the person who has to put order into the world or not, like you see him very much not want to make a choice either. She's like, this, yeah, like my choice doesn't matter. This is your choice, whether you're going to kill me or not. And he's like, no. Like, so you see a guy almost trying to not make choices. It just intrigues me. Just a thought.
Yeah. Well, no, and I'm glad you brought that up, Isaac, because I've been wrestling with this, because the scene with Carla Jean is almost word for word from the book, except in the book she plays. And
oh,
yeah. And I was wondering why, I've been thinking on this, why in the movie did they, I mean, it's obviously very intentional. Why in the movie does she, and it's a much longer conversation.
Does she play and lose?
Yeah, she plays and loses.
I mean, I think it's
so I think in the book, it's a less, that the answer in the book, Chigurh is still a person within he is a person. I mean, the car wreck still happens.
Mm-hmm.
Carson Wells hints that even more in their conversation. But I think in the book, he's a little more stronger of a force than a character, where I think the movie kind of calls him to answer to some of the same questions,
I didn't
not
know that
just
about
with
the
the car
book,
accident. Yeah,
There's
no,
really
it's
in the way
I didn't know if I wanted to slip that in just because, again, the movie.
I think that's great because I think
are there.
I think your assessment of that then is perfect, because like he's not this intriguing character that I'm trying to like dig into and bring out the humanity in him if she plays the game.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's actually kind of helped me understand that scene. But I want to ask you guys kind of maybe a final thing thematically, and then maybe we can wrap up just some little things.
Real quick. And I make you look at a coin the same way again. One, because I just realized that he looks at the coin, and as we all do, and many times, as an instrument of fate. This coin is going to make my decision for me. And she plays that right back on him and says, no, the coin's not the instrument of fate, you are, which is what he kind of wants to be. But yeah, I don't know. But he won't go against his principle. There's something there. But
yeah,
and I love the way that he tells the story in the gas station of the date on this coin is 1957 or 67 or something. And he said
1958. I've seen this movie a lot.
Can travel to make it to this moment here right now. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting way to look at things. But
yeah.
What you got, Josh?
Last thing I wanted to ask. So if the movie is about, hey, the world is bleak and violent, but don't worry, it's always been that way. And if you just accept the fact that you're going to die, which is the only thing you can know for sure, it'll be better for you. That's
for 4 payments of $19.99.
Yeah. I mean, on paper, that's like wow, I'm supposed to find hope in that, but I don't know. And we can bring a little more of our own Christian beliefs into this, but because, by the way, Cormac McCarthy is notoriously quiet on his religious convictions. I think his works are just about as Christian as you can get in the thematic sense. But like, I mean, how can we find hope in kind of accepting our limitations in the world, the consequences for the freedom that we have, but also have hope in the fact that, you know, just accepting the fact that we're going to die someday. I mean, is that something that's real?
Bien.
What?
What, the fatedness of that?
I was
Is that
calling
what
Ben.
Yeah.
I was calling Ben back into the conversation.
Oh, that was I was like, bien, like French.
You ever reach those moments where you just kind of play back and you're like, man, I've talked a lot, and so you stop talking for a while? That's where I was. Yeah, so I don't know if I would necessarily say that McCormac McCarthy's as Christian as you can get, per se, because he also did The Road, right?
Yeah.
Which is not very bleak and not necessarily hopeful, depending on your perspective on it. We're not going to go there.
It's hopeful, I promise.
Because the kid lives. I don't know about that, but either way,
every parent's gonna die.
Either way, mom offed herself and stuff. Why are we different book, different movie? All right.
Yeah.
I think fate being the overarching theme, even whenever it comes to death, that you can't outrun it, is universal amongst every character there, and I think just for me, it's. I go back to the car wreck at the end, that he has abided by his own principles. He has followed his convictions to the letter, supposedly. We don't necessarily know how the coin toss plays out, but we assume that he followed his convictions to the letter in dealing with her, that he vowed that he was going to either kill her, but he gave her the grace of the coin toss. And then he drives the speed limit, and then gets hit by a car while going through a green light. And so the idea that there's that he's just going to continue being another victim of fate, just like anyone else, I think is right there. I do have a question for Josh, though. Does it specifically mention in the book that while he's driving off, he looks back at the two youths on their bikes?
They are, I can't remember exactly how it's phrased. They are preset before they come up to him after the wreck. So I'm almost sure that they are mentioned in some point, whether it's, I mean, obviously a narrative description is going to be different. I don't know if he sees them necessarily before.
I just didn't know if that had anything to do with the name of the book, because you have him look back at these youths and then he gets hurt. And so I don't know if the factor of him being aged now and being a victim of fate has anything to do with it, and that's being played against the two youths that come to have to help him out, that he is dependent on them.
Yeah, I wonder about. And by the way, what do they do after he gives them money, and then what do they?
They give them
he buys their silence, supposedly.
Right, but then they fight over it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just like everybody has fought over the money.
Yeah.
To me, that was just a little. I mean, think even when Josh Brolin's crossing the bridge, and the guy's like haggling with him over giving him $500 for his jacket, even though he was clearly bloodied. And
yes,
and
give me your beer.
That's just a little thing of like, yeah, they hadn't got it yet.
Right. Well, the only two characters that you see in the whole movie, really, actually three. There are, wait, let me go back. Nope, two characters in the whole movie that do not necessarily seem to make money a chief motivator for what they do are Anton and Tommy Lee Jones's character. They don't seem to be, they care too much about it. For Anton, it's the principle of the money. He understands what money can do, and he gives the kids the $100 because he knows what it's going to do for him, but he doesn't care about the money necessarily. And then Tommy Lee Jones' character, like, money's never a factor. He's in that line of work, but he's not caring about money. But the only other person, the reason that I danced between 2 and 3 is because for a second, I thought that you could also say that about the wife, Carla Jean, was that it? But the first thing she says to Anton Chigurh about whenever she sees him is she talks about money. She's just like, I don't have any to spend at the funeral. There's still bills to pay.
There's plenty of bills to pay. Yep.
Yeah. So she sees the power of money and the importance of money in that as well. But she's somewhat has some motivations to it as well. But
in a sense, kind of like Chigurh said in his twisted way, she is accountable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not in the sense of justice that we might want to enact, but in the sense of your choices have consequences that might just lead to death.
Yeah,
for sure. I think just to get back to your question there, just like, what does this theme mean for us, specifically in our lives and as believers, as Christians, believers in Christ? Like, I think the obvious thing, whether it's intended or not, is the parallels that can be made is that, like, death is inevitable and our choices matter. The choices we decide to make or not make matter in regards to, for us, our destination, where we'll spend eternity with or without God if we do or don't place our faith in Christ. But like, I think it's something that everybody deals with at some point, right? The inevitability of death. And what does that mean for the decisions that I will and won't make? How do I treat people? What will I do, not do? Places I'll go, places I won't go. And I think through that lens of understanding and accepting that the death is inevitable, we all, what's the cheesy line? The mortality rate of humanity is 100%, at some point. Like, how I think the intriguing part is, as people wrestle with that, because everybody does at some point, what does that mean for how they live, the decisions they do and don't make? And I think that's
what have you been putting up all of your life?
Yeah, and so like the decision,
because you are putting up something,
right? And
like,
so like
all your choices, everything.
We're some of all of our choices, and some more important than others. And so like the Christian parallels are definitely there. I would just say the faith parallels are there, regardless of what religion you're talking about. Decisions have consequences. And when looked at in the light of eternity, they mean a little more.
Yeah, no, I'm there 100%. And I'll just say, for me personally, especially revisiting this, because I watched the movie, read the book, and then watched the movie about a year ago. And I reread the book recently. I watched the movie a couple times since COVID. And I mean, y'all are all over 30 and married and in various stages of family building. And
we had to go there, huh?
So y'all are all old and stuff, but at my age, you still feel.
Yeah, you're the one that chose.
I too.
Yeah, you're the one who chose to watch No Country for Old Men multiple times over COVID.
Yeah. So this is what I'm getting my point at is, for somebody like me to have to be reminded of this perspective of like, look, death is coming. There's going to be a time when I'm going to end. But I shouldn't despair in that fact because of the hope that I have. But it also, like you're saying, Isaiah, it puts my decisions into context right now. And so I don't know whoever's watching this. I mean, you can still think you're bulletproof when you're 40. I'm not trying to ostracize that. I'm just saying, if you're my age or younger, I guarantee you probably haven't fully tried to understand the context of your life in lieu of the coming death that is inevitable for you. Probably hadn't thought on that too much, but you should. And I think that as Christians, that's something that we should always keep in mind. And I think the image of, we are putting something up all of our life. We don't know what's going to happen next, but we know in a much more real sense than even Tommy Lee Jones's character that what waits ahead of us, it is something good. It's not an escape. It's not an excuse for our choices now. What we do now matters, but in the end, it is okay. It will be okay. And so that's been something that's just been really helping me during a very, very weird time. So
good stuff.
Other than that, though, any other thoughts on the movie? I'm kind of.
It was a cool little. So I don't know if it's the same way in the book, but the fact that Llewellyn, when he finds the money, it's because he's out hunting. And the second he takes that money, he goes from the hunter to the hunted. So there's that,
Well, and it kind of looks like I kind of get the idea that he was poaching.
Yeah, I think it was.
Like,
yeah.
because he picks up his brass shell and like puts in his. He's really careful about making sure.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, in the book, and this is in a couple of Cormac McCarthy's books, it talks about him to put this in the drive in the context of that the world's really not changing like Tommy Lee Jones is thinking. While he's walking in the desert, he passes prehistoric petroglyphs of hunters on the rock, and there's the direct comparison made that just like these hunters, tens of thousands of years ago, or hundreds of years or thousands of years ago, depending on your whatever your thing is.
Yeah.
Maybe just 3,000 years ago. But the point being is just like, and that's a recurring motif in Cormac McCarthy's Western works. But in this one particularly, it's putting the story very, very subtly in the context of all of human history.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really like that. But yeah, it was good. Also, a little thing I liked was how they kind of get the foreignness. Because in the book, Chigurh is unsettlingly exotic. Like you can't place him. Like you hear the name and you're like, what kind of name is that? And in the book, he has blue eyes, but kind of a dark tan skin. He doesn't really look like anything you've encountered. In the movie, they have his weird haircut, his voice. But then in the book and the movie, he like there's just a couple points, but like when he's talking to the cashier at the gas station, he goes, you know, what's it to you where I'm from, friendo? And like he has these really weird things. Or when he goes, do you have a scroogey? Like a screwdriver? And it's like, you shouldn't talk like that. You're a sociopathic murderer. Like, what is this like little slang that you picked up that I don't know. I just love like those little moments because it was kind of funny, but it just really makes him, even in those two words, a more unsettling character. I love Javier Bardem in this. Anton Chigurh is great. I can't say enough. But
It's got to be his greatest role, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, he was pretty good in Skyfall, but not near this good.
He'll be in Dune too. He's playing Stilgar. So
he's in
we
Dune.
talked about last time.
Nice.
But yeah, that's all we got. Any other comments? I'm pretty much tapped out on.
I'm just waiting for that haircut to come back, and that's about it.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome.
Well, guys, this has been our second edition of Movies with Josh. We'll continue to do it probably in this special episode format. I kind of like this. I liked how we took the time to go through it. But if you like movies and deep discussion about movies, then these are definitely the episodes for you. You can catch, see what I'm doing here, Isaiah? You can catch the Weekend Toast, our normal episodes, live every Friday at noon, Facebook Live, later on YouTube, more to come. Because you want to watch it, you're going to be there, so just tune in, give us a like, give us a comment, let us know.
All right, hey, if you've stayed with us this far, thanks so much. Y'all are the real heroes here. Let us know that you watched the whole entire video by going into the comments and typing friendo. Let us know that you were here. We'll like those comments, pin them, do whatever we need to, but we are looking forward to the next one. Thanks, Josh.
Did we miss anything from the movie that we should have talked about?
No, we didn't. We got it all. We're brilliant.